My name is Stephen King. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for being with us today. I am Stephen King. I'm a senior lecturer in Middlesex University, Dubai. We're on the advertising, PR, and branding program. I'm the co-author of a brand new module that we launched in September this year, which integrates artificial intelligence, the generative kind, as well as other forms of digital marketing and growth marketing techniques. I'm also the co-author of an open access research study into generative AI and the first experiences that people may have, or what I had, when I started to learn about this subject a couple of years ago. And it's published now. You can find it in Frontiers in Education. It's open access. So let's begin with today. So what we're going to be talking about. As per the advertising that we pushed about this event, we're going to be looking at how AI has affected education and assessment models. That's going to be the first section. Then we're going to explore a little bit of an autoethnography, a little bit of action research of how I have introduced AI within the assessment of one of our modules, and hopefully you'll consider that to be best practice, and we can see perhaps where the trends are taking us as we move forward. At the end, there will be an opportunity for some Q&A, and if you wish to put some questions into the chat, I'll be happy to take those questions at the end. Let's move on. So first of all, I just want to send my gratitude. I'm in this wonderful film studio, which is from Jalinga. It's here down in Business Bay in Dubai. And what you can't see is this wonderful glass screen in front of me, which allows me to interact and do all kinds of amazing little actions if I so desired. There's also wonderful lighting equipment. This is a fantastic tool for doing online learning materials or even assessment, as we're going to find out in a while. It's a software and hardware company. It has a lot of equipment. It also has a lot of great AI-powered software, which is where I was introduced to Jalinga a couple of months ago. And it's very, very easy to use. You just walk in, do your bit, and you can walk out, and it's really quite simple. So if you want to find out about Jalinga, it's operated around the world in 21 different countries with its HQ here in Dubai. Moving forward. So generative AI, before we begin, I want to just explain my flavor of what we're going to be talking about today, because there are different colors of AI. This particular one we're just talking about, generative AI, which in my thought process relates to kind of a slot machine. Where instead of money, we're using prompts, language prompts, whereby we are asking a computer to come up with an answer based on calculation of odds, based on what it's been trained with in the past. Now, this is I think it's quite a nice metaphor, because as educators, our students want to find the easiest way perhaps to address a problem, or the best way to achieve a problem. And what they can do with this particular tool is they can type in a prompt, test it out, see what comes out of it, and with a bit of luck, they'll hit the jackpot and have a really, really good response from their point of view. The number of prompts they have is as much energy as they have. And so they can keep going and keep going and keep going until they find a solution which is most appropriate for them. That's my description of what we're going to be talking about today. Because it's so easy for the students to do this, and because it's so prevalent now, and we're going to explore that in a bit more detail in a few slides later on, AI is now so heavily involved in every single aspect of our life. It's so accessible, it's so available, it's so powerful. Unless we implement and treat it with respect, this powerful, fantastic new tool can lead us astray. And we have fortunate here in the UAE to be taking quite a leadership role in form of education with the local Centre of Academic Integrity, which has launched its own green paper, I think towards the end of last year, and has held a number of different events with educators promoting ethical use of AI. And one of the key reasons and raisons d'etre of this group is to help to create a well-structured framework to address the opportunities but also the challenges that come with so much power. In this green paper, there are many, many, many chapters. It's a really valuable document. I do encourage you to Google or find it from the comments later on. And in particular, the chapter on assessment has 4 key questions, and some of those questions will be contributed to as the course of this presentation. Firstly, how can classroom practices ensure academic integrity within assessments? What are the acceptable uses of generative AI for assessed assessments? What curriculum updates are needed to prepare us for the future of AI-driven careers? Because that's a big talking point right now. And another point, critically, really difficult one. How much exposure should students have to the AI and these future skills in contrast or in complementary to traditional theoretical knowledge, okay, and hard work? So let's go back a little bit of history, put some context. We're going to start off by talking a little bit about homework, because homework is it's a well-known piece of teaching pedagogy, and it contributes to learning and assessments. Now, in this particular study from thank you very much. Excuse my thing. From Glass and Kang, I don't have my glasses on. They had done a 10-year or 11-year study of their particular students, evaluating how much they had perceived homework would contribute to the success of their students. In 2008, they saw that the effectiveness of homework was about 86%. So 86% of their students benefited from a homework assignment, which was then followed up with in class. 10 years or so later, they discovered that only 45% were benefiting from homework. And one of the reasons behind one of this is the wider adoption of internet and the availability of computers at home, which made the homework process a lot easier for the students. And so perhaps with less work, there was less retention, making it a little less meaningful as the study discovered. If we're going ahead from 2017, 10 years to next year, as a result of all these wonderful language models and other AI tools, we can expect that trend to continue to slide or even to fall off. And that will be a very interesting thing to look at. I've got here an image of a very famous UAE person, Othman Sultan, former CEO and chairman of Do. He was at an event I attended a couple of years ago, where he was explaining how in the US, the students there were already broadly using AI to help them with their assignments, or were advising their friends and informing their friends and teaching their friends on how to use it. And this complements an academic study which was published just last year from Vietnam, which talks about how the students were so positive about use of AI and so open and transparent in how much they were using it every single day on a daily basis. Use it every day. Yes, every time I use it. So from the US to Vietnam, everywhere in between, the students are using AI very frequently and on a daily basis. So what? So all of these tools are being used. And one of the problems that Glass and Kane have also highlighted is that when the students are using these tools for their homework, they think that because they're getting potentially reasonable grades or good grades, that is going to reflect upon their end of term assignment. And I think we can all agree, and Glass and Kane also agree, that is not a good decision-making reason, not a reason to be using these tools, and it's flawed thinking. And so that is one of the key problems of using the AI in a homework setting. It sets students' expectations that they are at a higher level than what they are, and will potentially lead them to disappointment towards the end of their summative assignments. And I'm bringing in Ethan Mollick at this point. He is a very prolific writer on AI in general and AI in education from the Wharton School. And if you follow him on LinkedIn or check up with his newsletters, you'll be very well informed of what's happening at the bleeding edge. And what he's currently saying is that the last 18 months have seen the most rapid change in human written communication ever. That is a really big thing to say. And I think we should justify that a little bit. So let's look at some more of these papers. In a study from Bastani et al. Just this year, they revealed that using ChatGPT as part of a maths tutorial using whether it was a basic version or a one which had been tailored by the school, students received a significant improvement in their performance of between 48 to 127%, depending on whether they're using a basic version or a tailored version, which is great. However, when that was taken away from them, they had a 17% reduction in performance against students who'd never had access, meaning that if the students hadn't been introduced to the AI, they would be a little bit further ahead if they didn't have were in a situation where they didn't have to use it. Additionally, creates this sense of a dependency on the AI. That's also was observed in my own study with my colleague Judy Proseto of Middlesex University. And dependency comes out because the students are under pressure to achieve highest grades, and they're under time pressure as well. So when they're under this time pressure and under this intense pressure to perform, what they're going to do is they go to our friendly slot machine and they're going to use it as much as possible. However, the negative impact of this is that there will be increased laziness, increased spread of information, misinformation, low levels of creativity, reduced critical thinking, and reduced independent thinking. And that's from Zhang et al. From, I think that's in Singapore or Korea. And so the answer then is obvious. Here are all these wonderful apps that are out there. Let's just ban them. Except we can't really do that, can we? And in fact, in reality, if we look at financial consumer complaints, 18% of consumer complaints in another study were identified as having LLM language inside of it. Who writes financial consumer complaints? Mom and dad. Corporate press releases, 24%. I'm from the advertising and PR environment. The fact that a quarter of all press releases now have large language models, text generated by GPT inside them is quite staggering. UN press releases, so it's not just corporate press releases, we're talking about the multilateral system, the government, the regulators. They're also using large language models, apparently, to help them with their public communications. And financial accounts, SMB. Again, this is perhaps mum and dad using these large language models to help them with their day-to-day activities and important tasks. That's a study from Stanford University, just published earlier this year. Additionally, this is from Claude, and Claude has ranked 6 different careers depending on their use of Claude AI. And the computers and mathematical career paths, about 40% of them are just using Claude, nothing else. They're just monitoring the use of Claude. Arts and media, where I live, 10.3%, second highest. Education and library, office and admin, life physical, everybody is using AI at some part of their job. And it gets worse. The 2024 annual work trend from Microsoft, this is last year, they're saying that 60% will not hire someone without AI skills. And 71% will hire someone with less direct experience or knowledge if they have AI skills, which is just fantastic. And the third point, which is something which I've discussed and argued here is in different forums, is that junior candidates have a new edge, with 77% of leaders say that with AI, early in career talent will be given greater responsibilities. What I've discovered is that by working with AI, these young people are gaining management experience. They are managing the AI in developing powerful prompts and giving clear instructions. It is possible that they are developing these soft skills that are really important at a management level, and they are getting an enormous amount of opportunities to do that due to the fact that they can prompt the AI as much as they want, and there's no offense that's going to be caused. They can really work out how to make the AI deliver the response that they want, and that same clarity of communication, that same appreciation of their personal responsibility in the construction of a project is really going to help them and see them fire strongly. So we can't not have AI. There's got to be some AI somewhere within our teaching, but we've got to implement it in a way which does not result in dependency. We have to do it in a way which is transparent and which is going to contribute to learning, not replace other learning strategies. And I have in here, and I'm going to attempt to use this wonderful screen just a little bit, just to zoom this up a little bit. See, we've got this little interactive bit here. All right, this is Ethan Mollick again, and he has recommended in one of his newsletters that we have options of going back to in-class essays. So no AI use. We're going to watch you get your pen and paper out and write it. We can keep outside of class essays, but forbid AI use. We're going to talk about how impossible that's going to be. Keep outside of class essays, but encourage AI use. And then the fourth part, which I actually particularly like, is something which has been going on for quite some time since before I got my postgraduate in higher education, was embrace the flipped classroom. This is where the students get given the work to do at home, and then they prepare and bring it back into the class where we do an activity and discussion. Maybe they might teach, they might do some slides and present some content themselves. I've done this as both an educator and as a learner, and I find this particular technique works really quite nicely. Let's see if I can shrink this. Wonderful. And then the next. All right, we have another study which is from Perkins et al. This is giving me, oh yeah, there we go. Perfect. This is giving you a matrix of different forms of AI assessment we can use, and it's giving it level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5. It's more detailed than Mr. Mollick, Professor Mollick's approach, and it's published in a journal. So first of all, you have category 1, where we don't allow any AI. No AI is allowed, and we'll talk about what happens when you do that in just a while. AI-assisted idea generation and structuring. This is where perhaps you would ask the student to use the AI to help them develop a structure for an essay, to give them some subheaders, some bullet points, for which they would then go away and hopefully read and research in more detail. Third one, AI-assisted editing, where the student has drafted something, and then they're using a tool perhaps like Grammarly or one of these other language enhancers to make the tone of voice more academic, to make it a bit more professional. I have dabbled in this myself a few times, don't particularly like it. It's not quite as good as my own quality, and it is a bit hit and miss, so encouraging this particular form of teaching and learning of this particular tool is not one of my favorites. AI task completion with human evaluation. This is quite helpful. We'll show you an example of that in a moment. This is where you ask the AI to create something on your behalf, and then you decide whether or not it's good or not. This is particularly useful in some of the graphic design and video projects. And full AI, where you just allow the AI to be used at all points, and you can even present AI outputs. Next. Okay. However, as mentioned before, those type 1 courses, the ones where no AI is allowed, according to Perkins, and in my own personal opinion as well, where AI-generated writing is completely forbidden, is unsustainable. And this is an example of what happens if you do try to use a no AI strategy where people are writing these papers again by hand. Remember, back in the day, we had teaching learning assistants, we had computers, scanners that would measure this kind of material and evaluate it on our behalf. And should we decide to do that again, then it's not practical. We'd have to go back in time. And so going back to the green paper on generative AI use, we have AI usage guidance recommended, so the students should have clear understanding of what they can and cannot do, and in which circumstances they can rely upon different tools. That is a very, very difficult task, because the number of AI tools that are out there and the different applications that they can be used for are changing every so often. We now have these new agents which will do a variety of different techniques just based on one prompt. Authorship authentication software. Put my teeth in. This comes off the Turnitin, I imagine. I don't know how this is going to work. The holy grail we would love for is that there would be a piece of software which would say that is AI. However, so far that's not been possible. Collaborative AI projects where students either work with the AI in a collaborative process, which is great, or work with each other on an AI project, which is great. And point four, AI ethics training, which I think should be fundamental part of many courses, if not all courses, not just in the terms of bias and how critical we should take the output, but also in terms of privacy and where the AI is and what we're actually using to train it, either accidentally or deliberately. Finally, the green paper talks about embedding AI literacy, which should be within education, and it recommends ethical use supported by social learning theory with scaffolding, collaboration, and peer feedback. And that is effectively what we're going to show just now. So I'm going to introduce you to an assessment and a course which I led and I wrote last September. This is kind of autoethnographic. However, it is not peer reviewed, it's not published. The content that's being shared here today is not it's not scientific. It is based on interpretation and an early interpretation and observations. So whatever I'm sharing here today is one experience of a class of about 30 or so people done once over a period of 12 weeks. There are a lot of weaknesses and limitations in that before I can say that this is absolutely de facto what will happen in every single case, and I couldn't do that even if this was a scientific study. This is one account, and hopefully it will provide some insights, and maybe you will be able to reflect upon it and see some of these things in your own practice. If not, that's fine. It's not intended to be a this is what will always happen type of talk. So we did a mid-semester assessment, which was how do we encourage UA residents to adopt plant-rich diets? We're a communications field. We do advertising, we do PR. So we're using the advertising PR to ask the UA residents to eat more plants. Okay. They had to do a 10-minute group presentation and a 3-minute individual video reflection. And they were given some stipulations. They had to use AI. They should use the AI to direct their solution. So they had to train an AI, and I'm going to show you how they did that in just a moment. And then they had to, after they had trained their model, they then had to ask the AI how they can encourage UE residents to adopt plant-rich diets. After they'd asked it and they got their response, then they had to identify other AI tools to make that strategy a reality. And they had roughly about 6 weeks to do it. After that, they could have, and this comes into a bit later on, to submit it for a Dubai Links, which is a competition, a student competition, which is operated here in the UAE. It's a Middle East-based competition where universities can participate. And they get recognized at an annual event, which is taking place next week, or the week after, here in Dubai. And this particular brief was also provided by Ad Net Zero, which is a part of the advertising industry, which is interested in maintaining our industry's climate objectives. So the first thing the students had to do was they were introduced to a variety of different tools, and they were given the strengths and the weaknesses of each particular one. They then practiced with them, they explored, they experimented, they tried to see which ones had free features, which ones had more paid for features, and ultimately they created a team of robots that would join them as part of their project. They explained which tools they were using and gave specific tasks that they were using them for. They had the opportunity to also explore the terms and conditions of each of these programs and each of these software to really understand who it was that had launched this particular program, what the limitations were, and what the potential downsides were. Examples of different tools. And then we had a classroom discussion. And this is, again, not experimental. This is just something that came out of our discussions of what the students felt were appropriate for them to use. And they had to make this decision making based on a variety of things that we taught in class. So, for example, we explored privacy. Okay? How much of our information is being shared to a broader field? Intellectual property. Are we taking content and using images from people who had not given that permission to do so? Bias. right? What faces and what features and what words were coming out? Is there an obvious misrepresentation coming forward? Inappropriate content, especially within image generators. And there's a lot of filters on these things now that prevent you from generating images which are accidental, but they had to explore that. And then unexpected consequences. Where are you? Ooh, there we go. There it is. Ooh. That's my eyesight unconnecting. Unexpected consequences. For example, a note taker which is taking minutes of a meeting, highlighting some of the early conversation, the chit chat that happens at the beginning, and presenting information which perhaps would not normally be in the minutes, but is now a whole comprehensive listing of everything that happened in that particular topic. And so they listed them, and these are the kinds of things that they agreed were good, bad, and they shouldn't perhaps be using. However, they still used some of those. And it's quite interesting to see. This is some of the universe of the tools that they eventually used as a class. And this is some of the images that they came up with. Quite pretty. Quite lovely. I'm not going to go into the advertising or conventions of these things. It's purely a case of seeing like the visuals, the images, the colors. That's all that you really need to take away from this. What we discovered was that there were a lot of apps being proposed. There were a lot of food trucks being proposed. The visuals for the posters were very generic and very, we want plant-based diets, so let's show lots of plants. A lot of greens, as might be expected. This is all very conventional stuff. It's nothing which is going to go, wow, this is going to win an award. But it was done in very, very quick amount of time. I mean, it took about, maybe after we'd gone through the learning bit and the ethics bit and all these other aspects, then when they actually went down to actually do the work, they were able to complete an enormous amount of work for about 3 weeks. So after they'd done all of that, they had until about January the 8th, quite a significant amount of time, to turn that into an entry for this competition. I had just stipulated one thing, that they were no longer allowed to use AI, and they should not use AI for the competition because the competition was meant to be a technical skill competition. It's not a skill of let's create stuff with AI and present it. It was meant to be more of a what you can actually do with Adobe Illustrator and a design skill and a sketcher and an illustration type of skill. So they weren't allowed to use AI, but they've already got such a huge head start. They know what kinds of things they could be working on. They know the kinds of images that should be there. So they only needed to do one last step to turn it into a board and submit. And January 8th came, and then I said, who's entered? And my best friend, the cricket. No one had entered, which is very, very unusual. And even on the bell curve, you would expect, okay, a lot of ennui, which is the character from Inside Out, which is my favorite and is always attendant in class at some point. But you would always expect 1 or 2 students to have taken the chance to move forward. So I asked them, I said, look, and again, this is not scientific method, it's just pure discussion between friendly people. I said, like, why didn't you participate? This is very insightful. First thing, they didn't know what I meant by don't use AI. They couldn't remember which bits of their project was AI, and some of it was their own. And they couldn't distinguish between, well, was this the AI idea? Was this my idea? They couldn't recall which bit was theirs and which bit wasn't. Additionally, what did I mean by don't use AI when everything has AI in it? Microsoft Copilot, Google Mail magically said you now have access to Google's AI in your, I didn't ask for it. WhatsApp has AI on the top of it now. I never used it. I don't know what it's for. It's there. AI is in everything. So when I said don't use AI, they're like, well, everything is AI now. I came up with a metaphor, which is very UE, I think, is with pearl diving. If you were teaching someone to pearl dive, you might put rocks on their feet, a thing on their nose, and let them dive into the water, and the stones would take them down. They'd hold their breath, and then at the bottom they'd find the pearls, untie themselves, and swim to the top. And then if you were teaching young people how to pearl dive, you would start off with this exercise. You'd be telling them to improve their breathing and what have you. And then they discover a scuba tank. They put a scuba tank on. And you're like, you can't use the scuba tank because it's going to impact your breathing. It's going to impact your muscles. You're not going to be able to swim properly. You're going to become easier. They say, okay, fine. They say, don't use it. And they say, okay, I'm not going to use it. And what happens? You turn around, you come back, and they still got the scuba tank on. And I say, well, why have you still got the scuba tank on? It's like, we can't take it off. It is now physically attached to us, biologically attached. Well, okay, jump. And you're effectively telling the students to jump into the bottom of the water with a scuba tank and telling them to hold their breath. That's not particularly practical. Second thing, although I told everyone not to use AI, they were there looking at each other and going, if I don't use AI, someone else is. This is a stipulation which is only being made on me and enforced on me. If I'm using it and if I'm not using AI and someone else is, then my work is going to be judged against someone else's AI's work. And is my manual organic work as good as, or has as much quantity as, the work that I've just seen produced before? Is it worth my time to submit something that is manual when I can see what has been produced by the AI? And finally, something which is a Matthew effect, which if you want to Google that, it's a really, really interesting principle. It means that those students who are less well off suffer because they invest time in something which they are disadvantaged in. And therefore they have less opportunities to participate and they lose what little they had to begin with. And in this particular context, if you think about that the students who are not using AI are having to put so much effort, so much more time into the project than those that are using AI, that's time they don't have to do other things. So for example, the students might have outside work. They may need a second job to help them through their the expenses of their education or to support their family. Therefore, if they're no longer allowed to use AI and the AI was helping them be efficient in something, then that's going to remove their opportunities to make money, which they actually need to actually keep their house above their head. I also had some reflections on this. Oh, yes, but all students had more reflections, which is really interesting. So over the course of the period, students were invited to then do a personal individual reflection, and assessing those individual reflections. You went through these five steps, which these 5 steps actually do reflect in the research that myself and my colleague Judy Prosietto published in 2023. They had initial excitement and confidence. The students were really, really happy that they were going to be able to use AI for the first time because they'd been forbidden from it. Imagine the pearl diver and the scuba diver. We've been telling them, okay, you got the scuba diver now you can use it. And they were like going to swim in the water. But as soon as they had started to use it, they realized it was actually quite hard to use. If anyone has tried scuba diving, the breathing and the mask and all of this kind of stuff, it requires different skills. So they had to learn how to use the technology. And they also realized that it wasn't as flexible as using hands and papers and other techniques that they've done in the past. Again, scuba diver, if you've got the big tank on your back, you're not able to swim as freely as you were before. So they discovered that it wasn't as good as they expected. They then started to see the bias and all of the discrimination and the security concerns. They started seeing it because they were using it, although I'd been telling them in advance. Now when they were starting to use it and use it for a purposeful reason, they started to see how much data was already out there. And they were starting to think like, okay, this thing can do this now. What's it going to do in the future? And eventually they were able to find a partnership. They found a happy medium, which is fantastic. They preached the plateau of productivity in the Gartner curve. And eventually they've said, okay, this is where we're going to have to be. Even the students that were anxious at the beginning and had no knowledge of technology, by the end of it, they were like, this has been a really useful experience, and we can see where this is taking us. So, my reflections, if any. Okay. If I found, probably we're all finding this at home, when we're doing our marking, if the AI is fed the same information from different people or different teams and is asked the same question, it's going to come up with the same response, right? And that's the same in creative as it is in anything else. We got almost the same campaigns from 7 different outputs, from 7 different teams, which was very insightful and very useful for everybody. When the students rebel against the machine, and one team did, and wanted to do their own thing, it was obvious. It was very clear that a human was involved. After you'd seen 6 or 7 AI versions, which you knew were AI versions because that was part of the task, and then one came forward and it was completely different, you were like, aha, you did this one. And they were like, yes. And so human interference is visible and is positive. It seemed to be stronger than the AI. And also there were some spelling errors in places which become more obvious once we've gone through this AI language enhancers. If there is a spelling mistake anywhere, I think we're all now a lot more alert to this kind of thing. In fact, in one respect, I discovered that the only AI that was being avoided was a spell checker. It might be a shadowing of the future as people become less, this loses its novelty and people become less aware of AI. Last 2 points, when offered a safe, ethical tool, the students went for the tool which gave them the best performance. That's very important. If we are asking the students to perform, they're going to meet our expectations. They're going to perform. And I think it's unreasonable to expect people not to do that. So we have to be careful in that respect. Takes a lot of confidence and competence to overrule the robot. The AI continuously makes huge amounts of data. It creates fantastic amounts of information. How do I edit that down? This robot has got all of the information of the universe, and it's produced me this answer which I've requested, but there's buckets of it. Which bits do I remove? And that is something which is very interesting. It's a task in itself. Get the prompt, ask the robot to come up with it, and then edit it down. It's actually quite interesting. Implications for assessment design, I've got 3 as we move forward. I'm just going to have the Q&A in just a moment. We've got a few minutes left. First one, I believe the student has to be present within the assessment by design. It's not an asynchronous assessment model. I think we should be looking at moving it to more student being observed or student being recorded, performing the assessment task. And this could be through a recorded reflection, similar to what I might be doing now, but in a less sophisticated fashion. Perhaps at home they can do it. A presentation, public presentation, which again is recorded. We do these quite well. Group project-based learning, where there is peer feedback on each other. These 3 different forms of assessment require the student to be humanly present at the time of the assessment, where we can then see them actually participating and sharing their knowledge and providing an authentic experience that they have actually achieved the learning outcomes. This is going to be quite difficult to do over hundreds and hundreds and thousands of students. So to keep it consistency, I would suggest that there will become AI tools that help to evaluate this kind of assessment and provide feedback, which will later be explained by a human. Because if anyone's seen AI feedback or AI tutors, even the best AI tutor feedback, it's complicated, and it's still helpful to have that human voice to explain what is meant. Even if the best AI tools that you can create out there, a human voice to explain what you did wrong and to give you that encouragement is still going to be so much more powerful and so much more valuable. I've got 2 examples of this. The first one is a tool called Udly. Some of you might have used it before. I discovered this. Basically, it's for helping you make public presentations. I discovered it when I was doing interview practice. Students click in here, it says you've got an interview for a particular job. It records you, you answer the questions, and then it tells you how well you've done in terms of eye contact, body language, tone of voice, language, and it gives you some advice. And it does it immediately. This kind of tool is really helpful, can be happened on a tablet, on a laptop. This kind of stuff is really, really useful. This goes into that tutoring kind of thing. And then for a summative assessment, I actually like this. something which is a bit more prestigious, a little bit more, it looks a little bit more complicated, it's really quite easy, but a studio that's the students can walk in, have a question, and then tell you exactly what it is that they have learned about a particular subject. It requires minimal knowledge or experience to use, but there are some really funky things that you can do if you're a very good Gen Z and you really want to do stuff like that. I think this kind of a setup is really helpful. It's quick, it's easy to use, and there's an immediacy in the feedback that comes out of it. As soon as the video gets published, there is a number of documents that get sent back to you, including a glossary of terms that you mentioned, which will help the student revise what it is that they talked about. It gives them a summary of their talk, and it will give them some guidance on what they should be talking about next or how they can improve on their talk, which I think is really quite helpful. Ultimately, that's the end of my talk today. I hope that was interesting. I hope that it might have echoed with some of your own experiences and feelings. If so, do drop a comment or a like or something in the chat box alongside. If you would like to connect and follow me on LinkedIn, QR code or my LinkedIn address is just there. I do post regularly on LinkedIn about all kinds of things on digital sociology and sometimes on sustainable development. I'd be very grateful for you to connect, and I look forward to any comments that you might have. So with that in mind, I'm going to switch the slide over, and with a bit of luck, there'll be some feedback on my YouTube. Let's see. Let's go. There we go. Okay. Wonderful. So can I? Okay, good. Let's go through some of these questions. Thank you, Hibbert and Demo. Thank you for joining. Is that okay? Demo, it works now. Great. Thank you, Conceptia. Hello, Ron. You made a question in the chat. What is your relationship with AI? Do you use it in your job? Thank you, Marina. So in school we use AI to enhance and showcase my students' icon work only, but it cannot be produced without the 2D natural design. Okay, perfect sense. So in terms of do I use AI in my job? Depends. I have many different hats. I use a lot of AI in my hobbies. Okay, I use a lot of the generative AI in my hobbies, and I'm using AI as an entrepreneurship aid. So I do like to conceptualize and come up with new business ideas. I have a lot of different passions, whether it's music or whether it's what have you, and I'm very eager to see whether or not I can monetize any of those passions. AI is extremely helpful at looking and identifying opportunities for that form of business activity. I don't really use it in academia, to be perfectly blunt. There are some tools which might be used to help me with identify papers or get through a certain roadblock. SciSpace I've used just to initially give me some reading materials to give me an idea whether or not a subject is actually worth reading. But a lot of these tools, they're not helpful. They are they leave you with a problem later down the stage. Doing manual research, of reading papers, making notes from those papers is absolutely critical to produce rigorous academic papers that people can come back and check up on your work. If you've used the AI, you've missed that initial the groundwork, the foundations, which no one can check up on, which is really quite risky in academic context. I have tried using AI to rewrite my tone of voice. It never really gives my tone of voice, and I do end up going back and having to re-edit it again. I have tried to use AI to produce big content, and I do end up having to re-edit it and edit it and edit it. And there is this, there is the analogy of if having to redo someone else's work is harder than doing it yourself. So in some instances, it's not help. But I have used it within podcasting. It's really helpful to help remaster sound. It's really helpful to change one form of content into another form of content, so I'm able to then maximize the time I'm spending in my manual labor of writing stuff. Sometimes I will use AI to help with some formatting of slides. That can be quite helpful. But in all, the AI is helpful for some things. It's not perfect for at this level, at this stage, for doing a full output. But it's really important to note because it can speed things up at a certain level. Absolutely, Renata, that'd be lovely. And I hope the presentation might be available for you to come back with. I'm happy to. The paper that I mentioned before is available in Frontiers in Education. It's open access, and if you were to search for King and Prossetio, it has to do with Gartner's hype cycle and links it with generative AI. So very grateful for that. I definitely put a connection in the link. Know how I like to see how you're using it there. I can see that, yeah. Great. Thank you all. Well, with that in mind, I think we are just about ready to finish. So if there are no other questions, then thank you all very much for your time. I hope you found it useful, and I look forward to connecting with you, hopefully in real life.